A very good evening to all of you. Today's lecture is going to be all about the general provisions, the chapter of general provisions, and also the penalties and the offences, under which I shall be covering such provisions of the RBI Act which comes under these chapters, right? So starting with the section 46, it states that there should be a contribution by central government to the Reserve Bank Fund. Section 46 capital A thereafter talks about contribution to National Rural Credit Fund, जिसको फर्दर डिवाइड किया जाएगा लॉन्ग टर्म ऑपरेशंस और स्टेबलाइजेशन फंड के अंतर्गत, और इनमें आपको कितना कंट्रीब्यूशन करना है, सच सम एज इट सीम्स टू बी नेसेसरी. नेक्स्ट कम्स इन द पिक्चर सेक्शन 46 C, which talks about नेशनल इंडस्ट्रियल क्रेडिट. ये भी एक तरह का लॉन्ग टर्म ऑपरेशन फंड है. इनिशियली इसमें 10 करोड़ रुपए इन्वेस्ट होने हैं. फिर इसके बाद एवरी ईयर यू विल हैव टू डिसाइड व्हाट अमाउंट नीड्स टू बी कंट्रीब्यूटेड टू इट. फिर आता है सेक्शन 46 कैपिटल डी, अंडर विच इट टॉक्स अबाउट नेशनल हाउसिंग क्रेडिट. इट इज़ ऑल्सो अ काइंड ऑफ अ लॉन्ग टर्म ऑपरेशन फंड. परचेजिंग ऑफ बॉन्ड बाय द नेशनल हाउसिंग बोर्ड्स, ये सारी चीज़ें डील करता है आपका सेक्शन 46 कैपिटल डी. When it comes to section 47, it talks about allocation of surplus funds to the central government. 48 talks about exemption of banks from income tax or super tax on income of profit and gains. Next, section 49 talks about publication of bank rate. That is to say that the standard rate should be published time to time. Section 50 talks about auditors, and it states that they should be 2 in number and tenure should be 1 year, and they can also be reappointed. 51 talks about the special auditors, which states that CAG can examine the accounts of banks. Next comes the powers and duties of auditors, which has been talked about under section 52. So we can say that the auditors have the power to examine books and also prepare a report. The remaining provisions are section 53, which talks about returns, and it may be published by the central government. That is a weekly account of issue or banking department. Then comes rural and credit development under section 54. It needs to maintain expert staff जो गाइडेंस दे सके या स्पेशल स्टडीज़ कंडक्ट कर सके विच आर नेसेसरी फॉर प्रमोटिंग integrated rural development. Section 54 capital A talks about delegation of power. That means government can delegate its power to the deputy governor, and if deputy governor acts in such accordance, it is conclusive of his authority. Section 54 AA talks about power of bank to depute its employees to other institutions, जैसे कि institutions which are wholly or substantially owned, development banks, UTI. 57 talks about liquidation of the bank, and which will not happen as per the Companies Act, definitely. Section 58 talks about power of the central board to make regulations. 58 capital A talks about protection of action taken in good faith. So these many provisions comes under the chapter general provisions under the RBI Act 1934. Now if we talk about chapter of penalties under RBI Act, it can be categorized into these many things. First is penalties, which has been talked about under section 58B. Offences by companies, 58C. Application of section 58B barred by section 58D. Cognizance of offences under section 58E. Application of fine, 58F. And lastly, the power of bank to impose fine under section 58G. Section 59, 60 and 61 are repealed. 58 capital B talks about that if there is any willful making of false statement, there should be imprisonment up to 3 years and also fine. The second provision states that if the bank fails to produce books or accounts or documents or furnish the statement or information, there should be fined up to rupees 1 lakh. Plus, If offense continues, rupees 5,000 for every day till it continues. Provision 3 talks about the contravention of section 31, and basically it provides for that the punishment is fine equivalent to the amount involved. The fourth provision talks about disclosure of credit info, which we have earlier talked. तो अगर आप क्रेडिट इन्फो का डिस्क्लोजर करते हैं विच इज़ अगेंस्ट द रूल, तो उस केस में इम्प्रिजनमेंट है 6 महीने की और फाइन है ₹1,000 और बोथ. So 58 4 also has certain parts for A, for AA, for AAA. 4A states that if there is a contravention of section 45 capital I capital A clause 1, there should be imprisonment of 1 year to 5 year and fine rupee 1 lakh to 25 lakhs. 4AA talks about if auditor fails to comply under section 45 MA, there should be fine up to rupee 10 lakhs. 44 AAA talks about if there is a failure in compliance with any order made by the company law board under section 45 QA clause 2, the imprisonment should be up to 3 years plus fine rupees 5,000 for every day of continuance. Section 858 capital B clause 5 states if any person other than an auditor first receives any deposit in contravention of chapter 3B, second fails to comply with directions under chapter 3B, and also issues any prospectus or advertisement otherwise than in section 45J. So इन तीनों ही केसेस में जो imprisonment है वो 3 years है, up to 3 years है, but first case में the fine would be twice the amount of deposit received, and in the last case it would be twice the amount of deposit called for by the prospectus. There are certain other provisions as relating to the penalties. 58 clause B के अंदर 58 clause B का clause 5 capital A talks that if the bank contravenes section 45 capital S, there should be imprisonment up to 2 years plus fine, which would be twice the amount deposited or rupee 2,000, whichever is more or both. 5B states that the Metropolitan Magistrate or JMFC, that the Judicial Magistrate First Class, there could be an excessive punishment casted on any person who has been convicted under section 58 clause B capital 5 capital A. 58 capital B clause 6 states that if there is any contravention under any other provision, then there should be fine up to rupee 1 lakh, and if the offense is a continuing one, then in that case rupee 10,000 for every single day. Section 58 capital C talks about offenses by company. First provision states if offense under section 58 clause B is done by a company, then every person who is in a charge of business and also responsible for conduct of business, they would deemed to be guilty. And if there is a consent or connivance or neglect of officers or employees, then other officers plus employees would also be deemed to be guilty of the offense. Thereafter, section 58 clause D talks about that the application of section 58 clause B barred for any matters under section 42. Section 58 capital E talks about cognizance of offences. So first it can be said that the cognizance can only be taken on complaint in writing made by officer of a bank to Metropolitan Magistrate or JMFC or a court superior to it, and they shall try such offence. The notable point to remember over here is that under section 58 capital B 5A, complaint can be given by officer of state government. Clause 2 of 58E states that magistrate can either first dispense with the attendance of the complainant or direct the attendance of the complainant officer. Then section 58 clause F talks about application of fine, which is whole or part of fine towards the payment of the cost of the proceedings. यानी जो आपको फाइन के ऊपर इम्पोज किया जाता है वो फाइन ही आपको ऑर्डर किया जा सकता है कि आप उस फाइन के थ्रू ही क्या करिए, कॉस्ट ऑफ द प्रोसीडिंग्स के टुवर्ड्स पेमेंट अपनी कर दीजिए.